Good morning. I'm smiling because today we're going to talk about what the hell happened on Friday and why it is that once again, Donald Trump has proved that he is a flailing fool. And it becomes absolutely clear how this moron managed to bankrupt several casinos. What is the most astonishing is that there is nobody other than Tom Massey, it seems, in the Republican Party who is willing to say enough is enough. I mean, we've got this adjudicated rapist. He's been convicted on 34 felony counts for fraud associated with hiding payments designed to interfere in the 2016 election. He is threatening now war with Iran. He, without congressional approval, kidnapped a foreign leader. I mean, it goes on and on. But today, can we just focus on the Supreme Court decision on Friday that came down and essentially said, you have the worst lawyers and you're the most stupid man on the face of the earth. Everyone and anyone told Donald Trump that trying to use the legal authority he tried to impose these blanket tariffs across the world was unconstitutional. And specifically, let's just be real clear, Donald Trump, so he could have maximum flexibility without congressional intervention or having to do any kind of investigation. Man doesn't like his homework. He doesn't like the facts. He likes to be a whimsical dictator. Donald, and to extract favors, right? He wanted to use the International Economic Emergencies Powers Act, IEPA. He wanted to use a specific law not designed for imposing tariffs, which are import taxes, in order to essentially punish countries by making their imports into the US more expensive, right? He wanted to do that. Remember, the countries don't pay the taxes. These taxes, known as tariffs, are paid by US businesses. And on Friday, he lost big time. And you may wish to know that the parties who brought these lawsuits were businesses based in the United States who suffered from these tariffs, and they won. Now, I want you to know that there is of course, question of now what? Now what happens? Do these businesses get refunds? We're talking about a $175 billion illegal tax. You heard me. Donald Trump, a Republican, these people who say, Grover Norquist, who said, no new taxes. He makes people sign a no tax pledge. Donald Trump imposed a $175 billion tax on US businesses. The Supreme Court said you've collected that. You had no legal authority to do that. And so now, what? Right? He owes, or our US Treasury, thanks to him, owes $175 billion. Before we get to the what happens next, and before we get to the what the fuck is he doing now with this new 15% tariff? Is it even lawful? Guess what, kids? Spoiler alert, it's not. It's not. Let me just actually give you the skinny on what happened, okay? Because I know you may have watched some of this or people drone on and on, but law professor here and not an expert in international trade or the US Constitution, right? My area is, as you know, follow the money though, and I focus on white collar criminality and public corruption. And this kind of is a little bit in my lane, right? Okay, so let's just talk about the bottom line here. This is going to be super easy. There will be no quiz. I'm not going to make you look at statutes, right? I'm just going to lay this down for you. The bottom line in this 6-3 Supreme Court decision is as follows. I think you are ready for me to tell you what it is. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution lays out the powers that the Congress has, right? It's been in this Constitution since its ratification, 1789, right? We're talking nearly 250 years. And this part of the Constitution makes it absolutely clear, and I'm going to quote, that Congress is endowed with the power to, quote, lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. The Supreme Court on Friday made super clear that a tariff, right, is a tax on imports. So Congress has that power. Okay, makes sense. Now, like anything else, some powers, most powers in the Constitution can be delegated. Now, there is a question about how much of the power can be delegated, and this is a fight that has been playing out for God knows how long at the Supreme Court. But let's be clear, Congress has, in certain instances, delegated, given, granted through a statute, a law passed by Congress, signed by the president, has delegated to the US president the right, in, as I said, certain circumstances to, without checking with Congress, go ahead and impose import taxes, right? Okay, great. But the statute Donald Trump tried to use, and we've looked at this before, this IEPA, International Economic Emergencies Powers Act, does not, according to the Supreme Court, 6-3, allow him to do this. And so here's the deal. I actually read the decision, folks, and it's easier to read than you would actually think. And here's why. It's easier to read because a lot of it is not the majority decision, right? So let me just explain. This is a little bit of a weird, this can happen when things are controversial, where there can be a majority decision. In this case, it was 6-3, right? There can be a majority decision, and that majority decision can be hold on one second. I thought I was going to share this with you. Yeah, I think. Oh, anyway, the majority decision in this case was, as I said, 6-3. But what part of this very, very lengthy document, it's 170 pages, did I actually have to read? Friends, it wasn't that much. Now, of course, I want to read the other parts that are not law. But first, I always like to focus on what actually was the decision. So I just want to make this super clear. John Roberts, the Chief Justice, wrote the majority decision, right? The opinion that the majority of justices signed on to. And that was 6 of them. But there are parts of what he wrote where he only had 3 people. So that is just commentary, right? So we get John Roberts' decision. So the first thing I did when I went through is I crossed out the parts that did not have a majority. So here is the bottom line, right? I want to make this clear. Donald Trump, after taking office this time, tried to impose, and this comes right from the decision, tried to impose 2 sets of tariffs on what he perceived to be foreign threats, right? The first was the influx of illegal drugs from Canada, Mexico, and China. And so he signed an executive order regarding that. The second foreign threat he tried to address was what he said was large and persistent trade deficits. I need to have you listen to that real carefully. Trade deficits. So I know this seems basic, but when you hear what he's trying to do, you'll see it was important that I flag this for you. Trade deficits means that we are in the US buying more from a country like China than Chinese people are buying. Let me say it differently. Trade deficits means that the amount of Chinese goods we buy in the US, Chinese manufactured goods, is, for example, more than the amount of US manufactured goods they buy in China. And the thing is, a trade deficit can be really good if people want to, if the dollar is strong and people want to buy goods that are manufactured for less money. Now, we can talk about labor exploitation and all this stuff later, but the bottom line is it's not true that a trade deficit is automatically bad. But okay, this is what this is what Donald Trump was focused on. Okay. So he tried to claim that this first threat of drugs from those three countries, Canada, Mexico, and China, he claimed that this had created a public health crisis. And then secondly, the trade deficit, he claimed, quote, led to the hollowing out, end quote, of American manufacturing and undermined our critical supply chains. Okay, so he decided that he declared these as threats, and he decided to invoke the statute called IEEPA. And the problem, though, is that IEEPA, of course, deals with what's called unusual and extraordinary threats to our national security, foreign policy, or economy, and so on, that originate outside the United States. And you must declare a national emergency, and so on. So, of course, Donald Trump did declare a national emergency, and then he imposed tariffs. And at the outset, he imposed a 25% duty on goods coming from Canada and Mexico, and 10% on goods coming from China. That meant if you were importing goods under this first tariff on the drug trafficking, you would, if you were a U.S. importer, have to pay 25% for most things that came in from Canada, Mexico, and 10% from China, right? And secondly, to deal with the trade deficit, he imposed what he called these reciprocal tariffs, imports on any of our trading partners, right? Now, that was just the outset. He's been absolutely Looney Tunes. And the Supreme Court majority, Roberts, tries to use neutral language, but there's this paragraph where he goes through all of the different changes, and he calls them, I just want to quote you, since imposing each set of tariff, the president has issued several increases, reductions, and other modifications. And he just sounds absolutely crazy. Now, enter these plaintiffs in the picture. We've got two sets of businesses, and these include, one case, it was 2 small businesses, and in the other case, it was 5 small businesses and 12 states. Now, there's some complexity about where they sued, which courts. That doesn't really matter. The bottom line is both of these cases wind up at the United States Supreme Court, and on Friday, they win. Donald Trump loses, essentially. And let's just be clear, and then I'm going to switch over to what are these implications in a second. Donald Trump was looking at a specific section of this IEEPA statute, and the Supreme Court, John Roberts, says that he is focused on 2 words separated by 16 others, and he believes that to regulate importation gives him what the court calls independent power to impose tariffs on imports from any country of any product at any rate for any amount of time. And here is the kicker. This is what the court said, quote, those words cannot bear such weight. That is the bottom line. So the court said, no, you cannot impose these tariffs that you have described under IEEPA. And secondly, they made it really clear, and this is in the decision, a tariff, after all, is a tax levied on imported goods and services. That's it. That's it. Okay. Separately, there's some sort of funny stuff in the decision where the Supreme Court doesn't address whether, if in times of war, the president would have some inherent authority to impose tariffs, because, and this is funny, the United States, after all, Roberts wrote, is not at war with every nation in the world. Oh my God. I rolled my eyes there because Donald Trump sure as hell acts as if he is. So, okay, this is what we get to here. And there's all kinds of reasons, and it's a fascinating decision, but I'm telling you, it's not that long. The rest of these pages include Justice Gorsuch going off on what's called a concurrence, where he agrees that Donald Trump doesn't have this power, but for different reasons. And we've got Barrett, we've got a bunch of other concurring decisions. And then we have a lengthy majority written by Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh, and signed on to by Thomas and Alito. Great. Now, I just want to make really clear to you what I just told you, that Donald Trump does not have the authority under this statute he tried to use to impose these anti-drug tariffs and these balance of trade tariffs, period. And it was $175 billion. So there's a real question about how the importers who paid this tariff are going to get their money back. But Donald Trump isn't focused on that. The rest of us are. Like, who will decide? How will that be done? And so on. Donald Trump is focused on imposing new tariffs, kind of like a Ponzi scheme where he can take the money from these new tariffs and maybe pay back the people who should never have paid the illegal ones. And the problem is, and this is batshit crazy, if you watch Donald Trump, and we are going to in a second, he looked to the dissent signed on by only 3 justices, the dissent, which has as much power of law as what is a note I scribble in class to a friend. This dissent has as much power in law as the shopping list you bring to the store. It absolutely is of no value other than maybe hoping that they will be a majority one day and it's a blueprint. And the second thing, it became a guide for Donald Trump, who decided to look at the Kavanaugh dissent as guidance for what he can do lawfully, which is insane. Now, the Kavanaugh dissent is so terrible that John Roberts mocked it in his majority opinion that all six of them signed onto. And he mocked it in the way only that it's quite a slap in the face, but it's the kind of thing that you might only notice, quite honestly, if you are used to the genteel communication in judicial opinions and don't realize that this was quite clearly a slap in the face. And what the majority said about Roberts is about Kavanaugh is that he basically was parroting Donald Trump's arguments. And let me read this to you. The government, meaning Donald Trump's, echoed point for point by the principled dissent, marshals several arguments in response. Okay. And it is crazy. Echoed point by point. So Donald Trump looks at this dissent, which is an echo of the arguments he made in court and has no power, and looked at it to decide what he could do next. And that is problematic because although Donald Trump does have a lot of options when it comes to imposing new tariffs, the path that he chose was not one. I just want to make that clear. And then we're going to get down to watching some of these clips. There are several different paths. And the one that he chose was under something known as Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. I don't expect you to know that by heart. But this Section 122 would allow the imposition, right, because Congress created this law, allows a president to temporarily impose tariffs up to 15%. And it has to be based on a large and serious U.S. balance of payment deficits. Payment deficits, not trade deficits. And that is different. I'm going to have an expert speak to you on video what the difference is. But guess what? Although we have balance of trade deficits, we don't have these widespread balance of payments deficits. It's different. It's quite different. Don't worry about it yet. I will explain it. On top of that, even if there were balance of payment deficits with all these countries nationwide, he would only have 5 months, that's 150 days, till the end of July to keep them in place, and then he would need congressional approval. So yet again, another whiplash. But on top of that, even though they had months upon months to plan, Donald Trump immediately asserts after this press conference, he's going to impose a 10% across the world tariff. And then he suddenly, a few hours later, upped it to 15%, completely wreaking havoc with the importers in the United States who are depending upon negotiated deals of less that Donald Trump had forced onto some countries because of the threat of these illegal IEEPA tariffs. It is a mess. Now, Donald Trump has other options, of course. Kavanaugh is right about that. But those other options are very circumscribed. They're not as simple as you would think. They require either existing tariffs to be modified, or they require the U.S. Trade Representative to do some investigation. He doesn't want that. He wants the ability to, when he's angry at somebody because they won't pardon a leader he likes, he wants, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, he wants to slap a tariff on, right? He wants to act like a crazy mad king. And court said no. And what he's doing now is, again, more of that. So let me now that I laid it out to you, one, bottom line, Supreme Court said tariffs are taxes. Two, the Supreme Court said, no, Donald Trump, you cannot impose them unilaterally without Congress. You need some authority. Three, the authority you try to use does not fit here. And then finally, have a nice fucking day. That's what they said. And so we get to the questions, a lot of them. Now what? So let's look at what this moron who held a press conference flailing and freaking out had to say. And after each clip, I will explain why he's wrong.
President Trump, you said that you were disappointed with that, but were you surprised with this decision? What you felt when you...
I was surprised because I thought that what we did was, number one, according to, I read the paragraphs, I read very well, great comprehension. I read everything there is to read, and I said, we can't lose this case. But we can when judges are political, when they want to be politically correct, when they're catering to a group of people in D.C. maybe. I don't know what it is, because when you read it, there's no other interpretation. There is no other interpretation. But it's okay.
Okay. He read all the paragraphs. If people were only presenting Donald Trump with paragraphs from the various statutes, and he came to the conclusion that what he was doing was fine, I don't think he has very good comprehension. Now, let's listen to something else he had to say.
Can't charge $1. I would have used 1 penny, but we don't make the pennies anymore. We save money. Can't charge $1 to any country under IEEPA. Not $1. I assume to protect other countries. This must have been done to protect those other countries, certainly not the United States of America, which they should be interested in protecting. That's what they're supposed to be protecting. But I am allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with that same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade. I can destroy the country. I'm even allowed to impose a foreign country destroying embargo. I can embargo. I can do anything I want, but I can't charge $1. Because that's not what it says. And that's not the way it even reads. I can do anything I want to do to them, but I can't charge any money. So I'm allowed to destroy the country, but I can't charge them a little fee. I could give them a little 2-cent fee.
First of all, no country is paying, no nation in the world pays a tariff. They don't. Businesses importing the goods from these countries pay the fees. And yes, having high tariffs imposed on exports of another nation does hurt the country because their goods are going to be more expensive here and people might not buy them. That is for sure true. Plus, it makes things worse for goods that are homegrown here, so to speak, or made here, because those manufacturers can also charge higher prices. But so he's objecting here, claiming that it's not logical that the statute that he is looking at, that he doesn't think it makes any sense that if there's a threat from a foreign country, that like a real threat, like if there was a real threat that he's claiming there is about drugs being exported into the US, or if he thinks there's a real threat, national emergency about a balance of trade, he doesn't get that a real emergency would need drastic measures where you can, for example, IEPA, the statute, International Economic Emergencies Powers Act, is used sometimes during times of war, like when we were in one of the Iraq wars, and there are sanctions on countries. People aren't allowed to export from them. That is a real, and violating that can result in criminal prosecutions. So the idea here, to be clear, makes entire sense. Donald Trump says, why can't it would be lesser, he thinks logically, to just punish a country by charging them some money. Now, here's the deal. He's just like he wants his VIG is what he's saying. He wants to take a cut of whatever unlawful activity. He wants the U.S. to do that. And that's not how the statute works, even if he thinks that would be logical. Now, I want to add two more things here. At one point, he accused the justices in the majority of being on the take, being paid by foreign interests. And I got to tell you, every accusation with Donald Trump is projection. And he was asked about this. It is outrageous. Let me play this.
You mentioned multiple times foreign influence over the Supreme Court. Do you have evidence of that? And if not, will you investigate that?
You're going to find out.
Yeah, we're going to find out. Do you have evidence of that? Yeah, we're going to find out. There's a shit ton of evidence about Donald Trump being influenced by foreign countries in such a way that violates the Emoluments Clause. And that case was sort of dropped after he lost the election in 2020. People have given up on that. There could be an impeachment based on that. But of course, he is making shit up about the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, so let's start with some of the awesome stuff. Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois issued this letter to Donald Trump on Friday. It's fabulous. Let me read it. President Trump, your tariffs wreaked havoc on farmers, enraged our allies, and sent grocery prices through the roof. This morning, your hand-picked Supreme Court justices notified you that they are also unconstitutional. On behalf of the people of Illinois, I demand a refund of $1,700 for every family in Illinois. There are 5,105,448 households in my state, bringing the total damages you owe to $8,679,261.600. The Supreme Court has ruled that this is yet one more unconstitutional act by you and your administration. This letter and the attached invoice stand as an official notice that compensation is owed to the people of Illinois. And if you do not comply, we will pursue further action. Sincerely, J.B. Pritzker, Governor of Illinois. I love that man, right? So let's talk a little bit more about these refunds. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was asked about this. And let's hear what he had to say on with Dana Bash this weekend on CNN.
Will you refund the roughly $134 billion in revenue taken by these emergency tariffs?
Well, Dana, that's not the big question. Let's just level set here. What the Supreme Court did was a very narrow reading of the president's authority under the IEEPA tariffs. We have other tariff authorities which have been functioning, Section 232 tariffs, Section 301 tariffs. And Dana, when you say it's a big question, that's bad framing because the Supreme Court didn't even address that. The Supreme Court remanded it down to a lower court, and we will follow what they say, but that could be weeks or months when we hear them. So the Supreme Court did not address refunds.
Sure, they didn't address refunds. That is clearly going to be up to you, which is why
No, Dana. It is not up to me. It is up to you. It is not up to the administration. It is up to the lower court. Let's just be clear on that.
Okay. Well, the Justice Department told a federal appeals court in this very case last year, if tariffs imposed on plaintiffs during these appeals are ultimately held unlawful, then the government will issue refunds to plaintiffs.
Again, I'm not going to get out ahead of the court. We will follow the court's direction, but as I said, that could be weeks or months away. That decision was not rendered on Friday.
Okay. Totally caught in a corner. What we're talking about is on Friday, the Supreme Court said the U.S. Court of Trade has the authority here. Okay, so this is important because that is where the U.S. Court of International Trade, CIT, now has authority over both of these cases. One of the cases had been brought in a different district court, and it will have to be reestablished in the Court of International Trade. And yes, the Court of International Trade will probably be the one describing how will these refunds work, or at least imposing on the Treasury Department the obligation to pay them. Scott Bessent is, of course, this unctuous, slimy liar who should know better. Here he says, no, it's not on us. We won't have to do this. And yet, that was one of the main arguments in public and elsewhere the court that the Trump administration made, like what a mess it was going to be to have to do this. Well, you know what? When you impose illegal taxes of $175 billion and you require businesses in the US to pay those taxes, fuck you if you have issues with paying that back. Now, this is the key thing here. Now what? Now you heard Bessent talk about authorities for other tariffs that they had been using. He mentioned something called 232 and 301. Okay, so those are tariffs that have been used, sections that have been used before by many presidents. 232 is allows for a president, and this is 232 under the Trade Export Act, that allows a president to modify existing tariffs on foreign imports, right? And Section 301 that he's talking about, and these are for different tariffs, not the ones that were struck down. It has nothing to do with $175 billion at all. The other one allows a U.S. trade representative to investigate and take action if there are unfair trade practices, right? That's great. So fine, but that has nothing to do with what Donald Trump did before and what he is trying to do now with these crazy new 15% across the board tariffs. So here is Donald Trump talking about Section 122. Let's play it.
Which have also been confirmed and are fully allowed. Therefore, effective immediately, all national security tariffs under Section 232 and existing Section 301 tariffs, they're existing, they're there, remain in place, fully in place, and in full force and effect.
So this means absolutely fucking nothing. He had that authority. If Congress doesn't like that he's doing that, they can take that power specifically away from him with regard to these tariffs. But he was slapped in the face about $175 billion that he now owes U.S. businesses, or businesses in the U.S. who paid these duties. Okay, let's keep going.
Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies.
Okay, this is effed up because, as I told you, he was claiming when he imposed the two types of tariffs that there was an issue with drug importation, and separately there was an issue with a national emergency in both cases with drugs coming into the US, he claimed, and a national emergency with trade deficits. And he thinks he can just slide these over, make a 15% across the board tariff for 150 days under this other law. And he can't. And so I do want to right now share with you an interview from CNBC asking whether President Trump's new 15% global tariffs are even legal. Are they even legal? People aren't really talking about that much in many places, but let's listen to one of the sources that is, because this gets into the weeds. And you know how much you and I love the weeds. Okay, I'm going to pick this up right now for you. Let's go.
Uses it or can use it. And again, it's never been used before, as far as I understand, right? So this is the first time. It can and should be used when there is a balance of payments situation or crisis. And in the case of the U.S., I mean, that's going to be a little hard to prove, isn't it? Because yes, the trade deficit is huge, but offsetting that, more than offsetting that, is a monster capital surplus. No.
Indeed. And I think a lot of folks are going to be questioning if there is a balance of payments crisis in the United States. Now, there used to be several balance of payments crises. These would happen regularly across the globe. This was much more common back in the 1940s when the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, the precursor to the WTO, was being established. At that time, the founders of the GATT established very specific rules for when a country could invoke trade measures to rectify a balance of payments crises. There's specific criteria that are laid out in the existing WTO agreements that call on the WTO members to review a notification from a country and for the WTO to call in the International Monetary Fund to make a determination if a balance of payments crises actually exists. So unlike other types of rules, there aren't countries who would think that a balance of payments crisis is something that's self-judging. The IMF is normally called in to make that determination. WTO members would review. That's at the international stage. Domestically in the United States, I think you are going to also have a lot of companies who are questioning, do we really have a balance of payments crisis in the United States? And thus, are these tariffs valid? And should a case be brought to the Court of International Trade to challenge these domestically? So I think both internationally as well as domestically, there is a lot of fodder there for challenge of the new Section 122 tariffs.
Yeah, Don, maybe easier for you to talk about this now that you're out of government, but we know how the president feels about the WTO and also.
So here's the deal. Donald Trump probably doesn't care that balance of payments is different from balance of trade. And it's hard to describe this without maybe a chart. And I think that what I'm going to do is have you trust me right now, and we can dive deeper into this on a different show. Like we can go follow the money. What the hell is a balance of payments deficit, right? But I want you to know that it is absolutely not justified. So I think the easiest way to describe a balance of payments problem or crisis is and I'm reading from Real Economy website, a balance of payments crisis reflects a condition where a country like us can no longer obtain sufficient financing through global capital markets, nor acquire the foreign currency necessary to pay for critical imports or service external debt, which typically leads to a sharp depreciation of the home currency. This is not happening. Currently, we have a liquid $30 trillion US Treasury market with a churn, daily churn. We sell $1 trillion a day. That is what, how much turns over daily. We are the foundation of the global financial system. And in short, when it comes to balance of payment, we are extremely healthy. So once again, Donald Trump is full of shit. Okay. Now I got one more thing for you before I've got something deplorable and then a crazy town. Okay. Here is Scott Bessent talking about the $175 billion fuck up.
It's going to be a food fight going after $175 billion in it. So
I got a feeling the American people won't see it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's.
I have a feeling the American people won't see what? The food fight or any of the money? So Donald Trump has been promising that we're all going to. So here's the big fucking Ponzi scheme lie. Donald Trump has been saying that imports, duties, these tariffs are being paid by foreign manufacturers, when in fact the direct payments come from importers. And we've seen that some studies that around 90% of that gets passed upon us to consumers. Now, how do the foreign exporters pay that? Well, to some degree, they might give discounts to the importers, but it has not been significant. So the reality is Donald Trump taxed US businesses who passed those costs along to you and I, like close to the $175 billion, right? That's what happened. Maybe $150 billion of it came out of our pockets. And while he was doing that, he said, I'm going to pay all of you a refund from some of that. What bullshit? Robbing Peter to pay Peter? What is this nonsense? And this is kind of where we are. Now, let me share with you. Actually, let's make both of these Crazy Town. We deserve a double helping of Crazy Town. Let's hit it. Okay. I love my cringeworthy dancing in my seat. I hope you enjoy it. No shame, no embarrassment. Why not? Why not? Why not be cringeworthy? Because let me show you something very cringeworthy. FBI Director Kash Patel, after his spokesperson reamed out a reporter for saying that he was flying to Italy on a kind of junket they probably didn't say junket, but to attend the Olympics. And they reamed out a reporter, this spokesperson saying, this is nonsense. He's just there to check out security. This is conduct unbecoming of a public official, especially the FBI director, and especially while there is plenty to investigate here at home. For one example, can you imagine being Nancy Guthrie's family watching this? So I want to show you what happened. There was a reporter at ProPublica who had a source inside the locker room of the men's hockey team who won Olympic gold, as did the women's hockey team. But here he is, Kash Patel, getting wasted and partying with the U.S. Olympians. Unacceptable. stay classy on the taxpayer dime. This is the same man who was moaning and groaning when Christopher Wray had to take a plane somewhere. This is the guy who it seems like is in a honeypot relationship. I didn't say that, but when you're with his girlfriend who he's flying here and there, this is the FBI director. In normal circumstances, he would have turned in his resignation by this morning, but this ain't normal circumstances. Okay, and our second helping of Crazy Town. So to be clear, what you're hearing here is, C-SPAN lets callers call in. They have some sort of show to comment on public events. And someone who claimed to be John Barron, which is the pseudonym Donald Trump used to use in the 90s to, to report on his own business and to talk about himself in the news to gain some kind of credibility. Someone named John Barron called in, and obviously this is a Trump impersonator, but people were so unsure because Donald Trump is so crazy that literally C-SPAN had to put up a notice letting people know this was not Donald Trump. So let's listen.
John in Virginia, Republican. Let's hear from you.
Well, this is John Barron, and this is the worst decision you've ever had in your life, practically. Jack's going to agree with me, right? But this is a terrible decision. And you have Hakeem Jeffries, he's a dope, and you have Chuck Schumer, who can't cook a cheeseburger. Of course these people are happy. But true Americans will not be happy. And you have the woman earlier, I assume she's a woman, she's a Democrat, but she said she's disgraced. She's devastated.
All right,
by
John.
this.
We'll go to Chester, who's in Baton Rouge.
We'll go to Chester, who is in Baton Rouge. Oh my God, I love that line. I'm going to try to remember that whenever I have someone who looks like a troll, I'm just going to say on social media, we'll go to Chester in Baton Rouge and see if anyone gets the joke. Okay, guys, tomorrow I'll see you first thing in the morning. Remember, we're getting ready for the State of the Union address. I think John Ossoff is going to be providing the Democratic Party response. My concern, quite honestly, is that Donald Trump is not going to want to go up there and talk about why a war against Iran is justified. I'm worried that he is going to strike before then, because that is usually his MO. So hold tight. I don't want that to be the truth, but I am concerned. I'm concerned for people here in the US, around the world. I'm concerned for people in Iran. I'm concerned for people in Jordan, where I have some friends, and in Israel, and all over the world. We are not safe when Donald Trump is president. If he strikes, we will be at risk. Hug your loved ones, be a good person, and we will get through this. I used to say it will get worse before it gets worse. And then I moved to it will get worse before it gets better. And that is where I am right now. So find your peace, keep fighting, and sign up for the March. I want to say it's March 28th protests. Let's see. Let's be clear. Yes, the March 28th, Saturday, March 28th, No Kings protests in your area. Weather will be good. Blizzards will be over. And we will stand up to this dangerous, demented idiot who is nominally running this country. And hopefully we can encourage people to push him out of office, at least to vote, and get him the hell out as soon as possible. Okay, guys, have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Gen Talk Show, where welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show.